What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Game On Financial Podcast, episode number, I have lost count. Are we 18? Episode number 18. We still got to come up with a new name for the podcast, but right now, GOF Podcast. Today, we have a special guest, but before we get to the special guest, my name's Garrett. I'm your local tax guy. This is
Joseph Lingle, manager, Game On Financial.
Yep, co-host here. And today, super awesome, super excited because we're going to call it our first true guest. We had Melanie on a couple episodes back, but this time we've got somebody outside of the accounting industry, but still well within the content creation space. Super excited about what he has to hear. Our guest today is Ben Lake, financial advisor for Miracle Mile. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to turn it over to him actually to further introduce himself. And so, Ben, what do you do? Do you want to give us like a very brief synopsis of, like, obviously financial advisor, but kind of what you do in the industry and who you help serve?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you both for having me on in the first place. Honored to be the first kind of, outside guest. Hopefully the first of many, many, because you guys are awesome and deserve all the best.
We're happy to have you
on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my name is Ben. So I am like you said, a financial advisor. And what I do, I focus on basically helping people optimize pretty much every part of their financial lives around, how they want to live their lives, whatever their goals are. So, like a typical financial advisor in the world, of course, part of that means helping with their investments and their cash flow, but it also goes into anything that touches, what I call comprehensive financial planning. So a lot of that encompasses things that, we work on together, the three of us, for example, with our clients, tax planning, anything that touches how to optimize their income and cash flow, how to make their assets go to work for them, how to protect themselves, right? Protect their financial lives. That's a whole other ball game right there. And then eventually how to, plan for the future of, their own longevity, their own retirement, and maybe their own legacy, and then some over the very, very long term. So the short TLDR of that is anything that touches someone's financial life, I help optimize and plan for.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like we've gotten to see some of your work firsthand, and it's been super exciting. Obviously, we're going to get into that here in a few minutes of how we kind of connected. But I would ask you this: what are obviously there's financial advisors all over and kind of that deal with all different sectors and subgenres of all industries. How did you kind of get into the content creation and gaming world? Because that's how we came to meet. Obviously, Game On Financial specifically servicing gamers and content creators kind of specifically. Just speak a little bit on how you got into that realm and what piqued your interest there, and give people a little background on that.
Sure. I mean, I've basically always been a gamer since I was a little kid. I think I was, first trained on here's Oregon Trail when it was like on MS-DOS.
Oh my!
In black and orange.
Dating yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what landlines are. Never mind. Never heard of that machine. Kidding. Definitely have. Born in the 80s. What happens? Anyway, so I've basically always been interested in it. When I first started getting personally invested in like the financial world and super interested in what I do professionally now, almost viewed that sort of as game-esque in terms of helping people plan around the rules of the system, tax code, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so once the way I started getting into this specific place, helping people in the content creator, professional gamer, competitive esports player space was, when I graduated college, I actually had my first job out in China, and then I came back a couple of years later. And when I got back, I started playing a very interesting and very fun game called Dota 2 with one of my college buddies. And we started getting, pretty into it and pretty good at it. And I kind of realized at one point, I was like, wait a minute, there's a professional scene? Like, what does that mean? And I didn't really know what it meant at the time. So this was like 13, 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But realizing that was a possibility and then starting to follow them, starting to watch their content, starting to watch the tournaments, just got more and more into it and eventually started to reach out just to be like, hey, I'm a fan of what you guys are doing. Now that you're making a real living out of this and you've made some real money, like what are you doing with it? How are you guys getting help managing it, if at all? What are you doing to kind of plan for your own futures?
Yeah. How did those first conversations go? Did you just like hit people up at events or like DMs? Like how did you connect with those people?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I wish I could remember the exact specifics, but I think I started with like a couple DMs, or maybe I reached out to I definitely reached out to one person I was a fan of to actually get coaching from him. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
That was actually a really good time. There's a YouTube video of that still exists somewhere.
You're kidding.
That's awesome. We got to find that.
Yeah, we got to find that. J-Man, make sure when we go to edit all this, we go find that video so we can link it.
Yeah, I'll go hunting for it.
That's
It's
awesome.
terrifying. You're gonna see me in my original, like, high level gaming love of playing support characters in Dota 2.
There you go.
fellow
Now I am
support
real
player.
life support for Dota professionals and people in all kinds of industries or communities.
I love how you
But yeah,
phrase
it's
that.
part of the-
Yeah, so I love how you phrase that about being like real life support now, because you definitely support them in a different way, but you obviously haven't lost that love for Dota 2. I don't know to the extent that you still play it. We've gotten on and played Call of Duty together a couple of times because I know that you service that scene as well. That's awesome. I think that passion there shows through. I think it really shows through because it's very grassroots the way we talk about how we started, but it just started with you DMing somebody, right? I mean, you just kind of cold reached out to somebody and said, like, this is what I can do. You obviously are very knowledgeable in your industry, your space, financial advising. So you brought that value to a space that you just had your passion surrounded that. And so I think that's awesome because it's
exactly how we got it.
That's exactly how we did it. Yeah.
Garrett did basically just, I like gaming. I like live streaming. Let me just hit these people up and see if I can help them with my accounting, background.
To this day, I still do it. I mean, I DM, like if I see a creator who just, somebody I've enjoyed watching and I have a couple of them I could name drop that I enjoy their content first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And so just reaching out, and I've gotten so much more confident in that now because now that we service the amount of creators we do, it just kind of builds that confidence. But you've been doing this longer than we have. So now, like, do you still find yourself reaching out, or do you find that most of your, who ends up being clients, the people that come to you, do they come to you?
It's definitely both now, for sure. I mean, I will certainly still like go out of my way. Like if I'm at an event, I will go out of my way to say like, hey, like I recognize you, like I'm a fan or whatever it is, and say, hey, here's what I do. Like if I can be of help in any way,
of course,
let me know. Happy to be a resource. But certainly I think my first, professional esports client was now like 11 years ago. Which is kind of crazy to even think about.
That's wild.
That is wild.
2012. Yeah, it's been a while. But like even in those early days, it was pretty clear, and I know you guys experienced the same thing, that the need is there, right? The need for advice, the need for more information, and like even content like this is there because the vast majority of people, whether they're just doing content or whether they're on the pro side, competitive side, whatever it is, there's a extreme lack of education on what to do financially or what to do with any part of your monetary life.
100%.
I mean, I know people who like didn't even bother filing taxes for a while, which I shouldn't even say out loud because it's horrifying to think about. But they fixed it. They fixed it by now.
And we know plenty of those.
Yeah, I was about to say that happens quite often. So
yeah, I mean, what you said though is so true, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is because one of our goals here, obviously, to service people with their accounting needs, but just to educate people. We've found since we started doing this content, the amount of people that we can just help by doing content like this, just like you said, just to educate them on even basic stuff. And, hopefully this episode as well does that same thing, just to kind of highlight those areas that people should be thinking about, because it really just isn't talked about much in the scene. Obviously, content creation, gaming, live streaming space is generally a younger audience that participates. And so, people aren't thinking about financial advising often. People aren't thinking about taxes or retirement. And so, yeah, you make a really good point there. I wanted to ask you a question. So obviously, you talked a little bit about the clients you work with and stuff. Just to make it clear for those listening, do you own your own firm or how do you operate within the financial advising space?
Yeah, good question. So I am one of the basically lead advisors at Miracle Mile Advisors. So Miracle Mile is I would call it like a medium to medium large firm that is technically an RIA, which just means we're an independent advisory shop.
Gotcha.
I'm based in the New York area, so I kind of help, co-lead the New York team to some degree with the other partners here. Our firm is actually headquartered out in California, but we've got a whole bunch of offices spread across the country. And so the details in the firm are basically that we manage around $4.5 billion for clients all over the place.
Wow.
We have 15 to 1,600 clients or so at this point. So,
it's awesome.
Not a small shop, not the biggest in the world, but the key for us and the reason I love it here is that we can be very specialized we have a lot of resources at hand to kind of cover all these different topics in clients' lives, and a great sense of team approach to these people. And we're all fiduciaries, right? Which is a big thing I talk about with anybody is, if you're trying to trust the advice of someone like a financial advisor who's supposed to be covering all these different topics in your life, you got to be able to trust what they say. Trust is humongous.
For sure.
And fiduciary literally means like you have to always be acting in the client's best interest, not my own, not some banks, not my firms. It's always in the client's best interest. So that is a super important aspect of it for sure, which is true a lot. But the fact that I get to specialize in working with folks in this space in particular is great. I should add that we also, as a firm, and me as well, we also work with business owners in all kinds of industries.
Mm-hmm.
So like if someone asks me like, oh, so who do you work with the most, or who do you do your best work for? I typically say it's business owners, content creators, and professional gamers. And a lot of the times, the clients I work with are either two or all three of those things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of overlap I'm sure we'll get into in this conversation, but I love when they're all three of those things. When they are, they're not just doing their content, but thinking about, oh, if I want to expand this or start a business or start selling something else or just diversify my income, how can we do that strategically? And how can we think about that over the long term? I love stuff like that. So
100%. That's something we do as well. We love it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think all three of us on this podcast right now are business minded people, and we really enjoy how those things interconnect. Obviously, we understand the numbers side of it, but even from a marketing standpoint or a scaling growth standpoint, I know we've talked many times about this conversation, and I think that's the coolest part is that some of these small content creators, or once small content creators, have now grown. They may have multiple business operations that they do, and we kind of get to see the inner workings of all of that, and kind of be part of those conversations of some of those decisions. And that's probably the coolest thing about what we do, is not necessarily the tax return or the financial plan you put together, but actually seeing those decisions, being part of them.
Yeah. I'll say, Ben, you mentioned it earlier in the call when we first got on. You were talking about what you do and everything, and your duties as a financial advisor. You mentioned a lot of different things. So you said tax. I think you may have mentioned insurance, investment planning, stuff like that. Obviously, so when people come to us, a lot of times they're immediately thinking tax, and they may need bookkeeping, all these other services, but we're still very much in the accounting realm. You also just mentioned tax, but the relationship that we have oftentimes is while you advise on certain tax issues and stuff like that, a lot of times you turn it over to us or another CPA. Where would you say you draw the line almost in any of those services that you mentioned? So it could be even insurance or investment planning. Like, what would you say you spend most of your time doing?
That's a good question. I mean, I'll answer two different questions, I think, because it's always dependent on like each person's situation. I'm probably going to say that sentence about 50 times today. I'm sorry in advance.
The most common accounting answer is it depends.
Yeah, I was about to say, do we need to insert a disclaimer right now? Is that what we need to do? Just start the disclaimer, by the way.
You might as well just make the disclaimer a meme that just says it depends.
It depends.
Whatever. I don't know. Like, everything depends. But
it is a good time to just say that before you get into anything specific about what you do or anything. Is just that. Yeah, we're obviously talking in generals. Any situation that we have come up, specifically with Game On, it's going to always depend on what the client situation is, and the answers are always going to change. Nothing that we're talking about on this call, nothing that Ben says is advice. Please don't go do what we're saying.
Yeah. Please.
We're talking obviously in generals, and everything that Ben does is, obviously very dependent client to client.
Our job is to start a conversation today. So if anything that we say, if anybody hears this and says like, oh, I need to talk with my CPA or I need to talk with my CFP about this, that's what we're trying to do. It's not so much of you should just go do what we say right now. That could vary, for every single client, there's a different situation. So we hit the disclaimer. We'll probably say it again before we get off the call, but Ben, I'll let you continue with what you were saying. You were going to answer two questions and you said it depends on the client, obviously. So why don't you, if you could take over right there.
Yeah, no, and all of that was very well said. Excellent disclaimering. So
we have to do it a lot.
I mean, our conversations, they cover a lot of areas. And, the starting point can, of course, be different. The most common places that, are like the highest priority items to start with every year typically are around, in a very general sense, what are you doing with your cash flow, right? Your
Mhm.
income and your expenses, and how can we make that tied, appropriately to your short, medium, and long-term goals. It's like that covers a lot of areas. It covers cash flow planning. It can cover investments. It certainly covers taxes every year, and probably a few other things. The second very high priority thing is, well, what are you doing with your savings or any other assets you might have? Are they going to work for you in the right way? Do you have, too much in this area, too little in that
Do you
area?
own properties, real
Um,
estate, stuff like that? Or yeah.
all that stuff, different kinds of accounts, maybe, how much do you have in cash? How much should you have in cash? Do you have way too much in cash? That happens a lot, because it should be going to work for you over a certain level. And then, the one that no one loves talking about, but is still very important is, well, what do you have in place to protect yourself in case something happens, in case something goes wrong,
Right.
right? You know, that might be as simple as saying like, all right, well, you need health insurance. Do you have it? Yes, maybe you're young enough that you already have, coverage, from your parents' plan or something like that. Or maybe you're a W-2 employee of a team org and they're giving you health insurance. Great.
Right.
There's much more we can talk about on that side of things with other kinds of protections and insurance and that kind of stuff. But um, it covers all those areas. Those are pretty much the highest priority ones. And I think when to answer your question on, how do we all work, in a complementary fashion, basically as a team, meaning like me at Miracle Mile, you guys at Game On Financial, when it comes to the tax side of things, our focus is how do taxes weave, um, in a long-term way with everything else going on in your financial life or your financial plan, right? So in short, that means my focus is trying to figure out how to minimize your lifelong tax obligations. There's a lot of interesting strategies we can talk about. Most CPAs in the world, not you guys, most CPAs in the world just focus on how do we get taxes to be lower this year and the year after that and the year
Right.
after that.
Right.
And sometimes that can result in things that are very beneficial. Sometimes it can result in things that can kind of come back to bite you in a very expensive way much later on in life.
Some
Um,
CPAs is just how can we get this return done this year?
Yeah. Yeah.
Period.
How
Get it
fast
done.
can we get it done on time?
Like, is there even planning being done most of the time?
Right.
Probably
Yeah.
not.
Right.
You guys are phenomenal at doing that. And so like
Thank you.
when we're talking to clients at the same time, it's usually, all right, well, here's where we're going. Here are the goals. How about these strategies? And like we'll have that conversation together. And then some parts of those strategies, I need to go do to implement. Our firm will go do it, with the client at hand, of course. And other parts you guys need to go do, and you're the only ones who can because you're the CPAs. So it's really much more important and actually much more beneficial from the client's point of view to have the team in place. The team being, their accountants, you guys, and an advisor looking at the big picture together. So
Yeah.
Maybe even additionally we sometimes talk about, and we probably could go down a rabbit hole with this, but even an agent, an attorney at some level too, because there's also going to be situations there where that person's involved, which we do kind of work as a team sometimes with clients on that type of stuff. I want to touch on one thing that you said at the beginning of that, is goals. Obviously you kind of hinged your entire answer off of what their goals are. How invested are you in helping them set those goals? And generally speaking, like what are some of those goals for those clients that you work with? Is it, those short-term goals, like I want to make more money? Is it savings? Is it mainly for long-term, like retirement? What are some of those goals, and like how do you help them set those?
Yeah, and that honestly that can be a challenge, but it is the most important part of the conversation. I think the whole philosophy that's at least worth thinking about, this is one that I adhere to, is that money in and of itself isn't a goal. Money is a tool to help you live the life you want to live.
Sure.
Right? Like I kind of say this
We should probably
sometimes,
quote
but
that. And
Yeah.
put it on
Clip
the
that,
billboard.
J-Man.
flip that, right? Like I'll be honest, like most of my clients do not want to grow up to be dragons living in a cave, sleeping on their bed of gold by
Right.
themselves. Right? Like sounds kind of cool if you're talking about like a medieval, I don't know, fantasy book, but maybe not for someone's actual life.
Right.
So, sometimes people are very clear, like, hey, like here's where I am in like, the scope of my life or whatever, where I think I am. I know I want to do this, this, and this, but like beyond that, I don't really know, and that's okay. Totally fine not to know how exactly you want to live your life for the next 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years.
Yeah.
But helping set some of those goals, is definitely part of what I do. So if it's as simple as someone saying like, hey, like I've started to do really well in this space. I just want to know how to do a couple things better, like what to do with my savings or what to do from a tax planning point of view. That's a great place to start. And part of the conversation is then like, all right, well, in the short term, you know, let's talk about some like the safety first kind of goals. Like, what do you have? What do you need to have in place in case something goes wrong, or in case you can't, work for a little bit, or in case something drops off? So there's sort of the very basics of, let's just have some short-term safety, savings in place through an emergency fund, maybe through things like health insurance or whatever else it might be.
Sure.
But some of those things are relatively straightforward. And other times, some of the goals are like, hey, like I want to save up to buy, a house for myself or even for my parents at some point in the future. How soon can I get there? What should I be thinking about? That can be a much more concrete goal, which we can, work towards. But again, not in a vacuum, because the other goal that either is or isn't always stated is that at some point in life, you want to be prepared to either, fully retire or transition to a new career altogether, or just become work optional, kind of have that lifestyle where you can feel very financially secure no matter how old you are, and you might not need to focus so much on the grind you're currently doing, which is always great. And how do you then take those kinds of, maybe softer goals, maybe concrete goals, maybe long-term goals, and do, make progress and make plans for all of them simultaneously?
Yeah.
And that's very achievable and kind of the dream.
Really quick, I was going to say, and Jamar, and this may be your short right here, but I love what you just said, Ben, in that you said goals. You also said, in the next 50, 60, 70 years. We said earlier with a disclaimer that everybody's, basically if all this hinges on the goals and everybody's goals are different, that's why we say it depends, right? All the time. Is because what works for one person, even in the same exact financial scenario, what works for one person may not be the best case for the next person. And I think that's crucial. I would almost argue, based on what you're saying, the two most important things here are, one, the established relationship, right? So if we've already talked about our goals can change, we don't know what's going to happen next 50, 60, 70 years. We have both protection, and then we also want to grow our money. We want to maybe do other things that have nothing to do with growing money, but go on vacation, stuff like that. Having a constant source of knowledge like yourself, right? And Joseph and I joked when we were talking about introducing you and everything, CFP, this and that. I think you're already very well qualified, and we don't have to go into like basically explaining why you are so knowledgeable and important. If you take one look at the website, and we know that you're, you know your stuff, right? And Joseph and I have the luxury of having talked with you several times, so you're obviously very qualified. You know your stuff. It's really not so much about that anymore, right? It's about just getting to know you and keeping up with you and knowing, like, okay, year over year, as my goals change, as my life changes, I can always go to Ben and know that he's going to, as a fiduciary, have my best interest in mind. I think that's critical, because now it goes from all of a sudden like, this guy, I don't know what to do with this, don't know what to do with that, to let me just ask Ben. Let me run it by Ben. Let me check with Ben.
Well, how many times, Garrett, do we talk about, a lot of times we feel like we're working with clients that 90% of why they pay us is peace of mind.
Right.
And I think with Ben, it's probably very similar. So many times people don't know what they don't know, but they're smart enough to get help on that question. Yeah. And I think that's where it all kind of begins. And, Ben, I know you work with a lot of clients that maybe don't really know what their goals are. You said something pretty, important in there, which was things change. Maybe if the money's not there in the next couple of years, this industry we work in with, definitely with esports, because we see that fading all the time with different games, but even content creation, right? It can change in the matter of months, where somebody could be making 20, 30, 50K a month or more, double that. And then they have a month where they make 5K because stuff just drops off a cliff. Stuff happens. And so I think it can be very important for them to have a peace of mind of just knowing goals change, but my team, as you said, are going to kind of be there to support me on that. And I'll always be able to kind of go to them. And I feel like that's where we love what we do, is just because we can support them on that, and we enjoy it.
The best thing for us is not necessarily what I thought would have been just getting to, it is a luxury to talk with some of the creators we get to talk to, because these are people that, I have watched for sometimes a considerable amount of time. And I've always really put him on a pedestal. And I'm like, this guy's just awesome. Like, if, it'd be awesome to play with him sometime or something like that. And now we get to talk with them, and it's really cool. But I've found that what's even better than that is the fact that a year later, 2 years later, they're still a client. They still respect us for the value that we're bringing, and they still see that value. And Ben, I'm saying all this. I don't know if you agree or disagree. I don't know how you feel about it, but that to me is critical. I thought, just getting to talk with them, that's so cool. Now it's like, no, like they actually respect what we do and they know why we're here doing what we're doing. And
I
now
would say-
talking with them is just like, oh, what's up? So and so, you just get on a call and it's just casual.
Right. And I would say a good question to add on the back of that is, Ben, do you feel like, or how often do you work with clients, like kind of Garrett speaking of, is it more one-off stuff, or are you working with people kind of doing long-term planning where you've had clients for multiple years?
That's a good question.
Yeah, this is a great point because that's exactly kind of it's the goal of the relationships I have in the first place, and it happens all the time, right? Like, so just to give you a very quick example on that, not only do like, goals change from person to person, but like any individual can change their goals anytime, right? Like life changes, something else might come up, all of a sudden you're doing one thing and you're like, wait a minute, what's that over there? I got to go do that. I got to dedicate my whole life to that.
Mhm.
We can figure that out together, right? What's the right way to do it? What's the right way to kind of create the right financial system to enable you to, maybe make that transition or even take that interesting new risk.
Right.
And I actually, to give you an example, had lunch with a longtime client yesterday. We've gotten through a couple of their major goals of, increasing income, buying that first house or that first place to live. And now it's kind of like, all right, well, we prioritized, something like buying a piece of property a lot in the last, couple of years, and we focused a lot of the excess, savings and cash flow towards that goal. Well, what's next? What's the new goal that we want to focus on?
Mhm.
Are there any other strategies you want to think about? And we started talking about basically more advanced, retirement accounts to use for the long term that can also dramatically reduce their taxes in this year, right? Having that at the same time as having maybe the mortgage interest deduction if they're going to itemize their taxes.
Mhm.
Like, that's a pretty powerful combo in a year where they're going to hopefully make, their highest earnings ever. So, people's lives change, and that's actually where you get the best value out of the long-term relationships that, you have with anybody in your team, whether it's a financial advisor or your accountants or your lawyer. Usually the biggest source of like quantifiable value you get out of whatever you're paying them is in some kind of life transition or, achieving a goal, working towards a goal. But it's those, bigger moments where a lot can be done. And then you need to adjust things afterwards,
Yeah.
right? But people might say like, all right, I'm going to hire somebody until I, buy a car or until I quit this job. It's like, you can think like that to begin, but like you're going to have a much better long-term like life and just experience in general if your plan is like, all right, that's my person to speak to, or that's my team to rely on.
Mhm.
Whenever I have any of these questions come up, like you guys were saying, that's just perfect. That's just kind of the best way to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great point because in this industry, what Garrett and I have found a lot with the clients we work with is a lot of people don't have a plan for their business in general. They either stumbled into some really good success from a game or from a certain style of content or from a platform growth, and they're kind of just living day by day, right? Maybe month to month, but not necessarily on their money, but just more so on their actual business plan or their income streams. And that they're not really thinking about the future. And because, this industry can be so up and down, sometimes, like you said, they do have a stressful event happen or something. And, you kind of, I feel like we try to always give them perspective of, hey, this, however many thousands of dollars a month may not be here next year. What are we going to do if that's the case? And so you make a great point. I think, we're obviously not creating goals for our clients always, but helping them think about the things that maybe we see as issues sometimes, or we've seen people not think about and that become a problem. So I know you're doing that. And just based off what you said, I feel like it's really important to have that trust, like you said, and just make sure that, you're working together. It's not just, hey, for us at least, hey, can you do a tax return? And that's it. We can do that, but we'd much rather have conversations with you on the regular and, kind of be in the loop. So,
yeah,
Totally. I mean, that's also like the most, personal satisfaction I get out of working with any of these clients too. It's sort of, being able to help them along their life achieve that goal or like feel more confident if something bad happens that they're going to be fine. They're going to be able to make it through. Right. It might not feel great, but like we can make it a lot easier. We can have kind of that backup plan already in place.
right.
Right. I've had a bunch of clients where, maybe they got cut from a team unexpectedly and, their income stopped or they had to go find a different situation. And, how do we kind of transition? How do we plan for all that? What else, needs to get done? Right. Like, for example, we talk about health insurance. If they had it and now they don't, what are your options? All that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
which are things that people don't often even think about. But I've also had clients, go through career-ending injuries, right?
Yeah.
And like that kind of stuff can be very scary. Sometimes it can be a real catastrophe if you don't think about it and just kind of throw in the towel. Sometimes it can be an amazing opportunity to launch a whole nother, part of your career that you didn't even necessarily think about doing,
For sure.
which has happened, which is great and really cool.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
yeah, having that kind of mentality approach is really the best, and I'm kind of very honored and blessed. Not not every client has to become like the best friend of the three of us, for example.
Right.
But I am very honored and very happy that like I'm going to a client's wedding later this year, which is
Oh,
going to be
nice.
pretty awesome. Like we've become friends. Like it's just going to be great. And like
Yeah.
I helped celebrate a very different client who's not in this particular community. Helped a client celebrate their own retirement, right, in their 60s, and help them figure out like, hey, like, you guys want to go and like figure out how to travel the most possible. Well, here's how we're going to create the right income streams and post retirement, investment plan to accomplish all that. So like
Right.
that stuff just makes me happy.
Yeah. I told you we had a call, what was it, a week ago now? I don't remember. I think it was a week ago. And we were talking about TwitchCon, which, by the way, you're going, we're going, everybody, the whole crew, we're here will be at TwitchCon. Except for executive producer J-Man, we're leaving him behind to make sure the ship doesn't sink while we're gone. But we, when we go to TwitchCon, we talked about it, and it's, I'm just excited to be there and be in the space and the scene and see everybody and all that. And we haven't talked the first thing about like, will that get us more clients? Will it do this? In the back of my mind, yes. I mean, over time, I think Joseph and I have talked about this a lot. It's just planting seeds, right? I mean, to be in the space, you got to be in the space, right? You can't just say you are. And so naturally, I understand that that's just one of the things you got to do. But I'm most excited about getting to see you, right? Getting to see a couple other people we know, a couple mutuals who are also professionals in the space, but also, running into clients, running into people who aren't clients, just cool people to talk to. I'm ready to see some of the content creators I've followed for forever who I've never actually spoken to in my life. I just enjoy their content and getting to see them.
Yep.
And, I think that excitement and that passion, I think it's very easy when we get on a discovery call with a potential new client. I think they see it, right then and there. And I think you would probably attest to that as well. It's probably the same case with you. I love that. Like, this is so much more than what I thought it would be, just what I thought it would have been just a couple of years ago when we were, just kicking this thing off. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but I'm excited about TwitchCon. I'm excited about seeing potential clients, even non-potential clients, just seeing everybody at TwitchCon and getting to be in the atmosphere,
Experience it, yeah.
Yeah, experience
100%.
it.
I'm pumped. I'm really excited. I mean, first of all, like, people come in from all over the country and all over the world for this kind of thing, and you
Yep.
rarely get that many opportunities to see people even on video sometimes, let alone meet in person. So
Yeah.
like, this is a
Yeah.
pretty rare opportunity for all of us to
And
see each other, catch up, run into people, which is impossible in any other situation than being at these kinds of events. So like, I'm excited for that. It's one of the more fun parts of my job in general is being able to go to like a TwitchCon, or like I was at CDL Championships earlier this year. And actually, the weekend after TwitchCon, I'm going to the International for the Dota people up in Seattle. So like, just being able to go to some of these kinds of events, it not only is just like really fun to be at, because of course, like you guys, like I'm a fan, like I'm there to enjoy the whole experience, but then being able to see people and like say hey, catch up, grab dinner, or if everyone's busy, like figure out a time to catch up at some point after the event when we're all back.
Yeah,
it's just great. It's
That's
just
what
fun.
that's what I was going to bring up. I'm glad you kind of got into it, but tell us a little bit about that. Like, what are some cool opportunities you've gotten to go to? I know you just mentioned a couple. I know you've definitely done some international traveling with Dota stuff, which is crazy. You've been to some cool places. Tell us a little bit about that and those opportunities, how they come up, whether it's just going to, to esports events, or whether you've actually gotten asked to speak at things or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm flattered that you even know that, because I've been doing a bit of both for sure. The speaking events have been really, really fun. Like, I actually got to be on a panel at TwitchCon last year, which was a great idea that they put on. It was a panel about like, hey, for all of the streamers who are here are people in the accounting, finance and legal space that you can go learn from in this session.
Kind of that
Ask your
team we were
questions
just
to,
talking
so you
about.
can
Yeah.
assemble your team. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And I should have mentioned this earlier, but while I'm thinking about it, the other thing I should say is, pretty much everybody in the content creator community and the gaming community in general really needs to be talking to an accountant, probably first or second.
Preach it, Ben.
Yeah.
Preach it, Ben.
Everyone needs to be talking to a lawyer or an agent with a lawyer first or second. Like right there, like accountants and lawyers, like you need that help. You absolutely need it to just as soon as you start doing this for any kind of revenue as a real business, you start talking to those folks, and that's you guys. Um, at some point in the future, maybe then you need to introduce someone like myself, like a financial advisor. Not everyone necessarily needs a financial advisor right off the bat. Just be very blunt.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs that, and if I'm talking to folks and that becomes the case, I'm a fiduciary. I will let you know. That is like here is some interesting advice, or here is something that you can take back and do yourself, but maybe you don't need to work with me yet or someone like me quite yet. So I'm always kind of happy to point people in the right direction, but
Definitely.
accountants and lawyers are really important. Go talk to one. Maybe that guy over there.
Clip
and
it,
that
Jay.
guy over
Clip
there.
it.
Clip it, Jay, man.
Talk to
That's a short.
I love it. Hey, I'm glad you said that though, because we even at the base level, we have an unfair advantage as accountants when you talk about sales and stuff, because everybody needs to file a tax return, right? So at some level, I agree, once you start down the content creation path and you're truly going to do it as a business, right? In the very beginning, if you're not earning, if you're earning very little from it and you just got started, maybe not, but yeah, as you start to establish a true business, yes. The thing is, we still tell people like, hey, look, we can do this for you, but I don't see a need for you paying us to do it when truly here you can do it yourself, and maybe give them a little bit of that free education, that guidance, and saying like, look, this right now is a hobby, right? And so if it's a hobby and putting it into something like TurboTax, it's actually very simple. It's not nearly as complicated as people would probably like to think it is. So we still do that. And to hear you say you still do that, and as a financial advisor, you mentioned you're probably on the back end, right? So attorney and accountant first, and then once you start to get really established, right, you're making decent amount of money, we're coming to you as a financial advisor, and you're saying like, even then you're telling people like, hey, maybe you're probably not quite ready for this just yet. Exactly. I think right. That goes a long way, right? Because you're effectively turning down what could be work, but you're doing it in the best interest of the client. Yeah. And that says a lot about you, I think.
And that's why like we get along so well. And the other like you mentioned, some of the other professionals that we all know in the space, like the people who are in this space, like as a major part or all of their career, it's because we love this community and we love what we're doing and we just want to help everyone. So we're pretty much all willing to say like, hey, like we're going to be a great fit. Let's do this. Or we're willing to say, hey, maybe this isn't the best fit, but here's how I can help you. Either I'll point you in the right direction or I'll answer a couple questions, and like maybe we can, continue to stay in touch. But like this is what's going to be what's best for you, even if it doesn't mean we're getting some kind of payment or relationship or whatever.
For sure.
It's really just about here's how we can help the best.
I think that also helps build.
That's what that real life position support is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it helps build that trust and rapport too. It's like, so many people kind of get screwed in professional services by somebody just charging them a billable hour and sending them a huge invoice after working with them. And they just don't know. We have so many people that are younger in this space, maybe first time filing taxes or first time working with an agent or something, and then they get a huge invoice and it's like, what is this for? We try to be super transparent about billing. We try to be super transparent, to your point, Ben, about do you really have a need for this? Like, we're not going to sell you something you don't need. And I think it goes the same with you, Ben. Like, if you don't see the need for it or it just doesn't justify it, you might push it down the road and say, hey, come back and talk to me next year or something. Let's keep in touch. So that's
exactly
huge.
Right.
Since you said, I have an interesting question here. Since you said, you do work with some business owners as well, and some people that are not necessarily in the content creation gaming world as well, what are some of the differences you see in, let's say, gaming content creation industry versus traditional industries? Because I know for me and Garrett, we worked in more traditional industries in accounting before we got into this world. And I think you have kind of some as well. What are some of those differences there? That could be whether they're goals or the size of the client, just anything like that. What are some of the differences you see?
That's a good question, sort of a tough one, because there's a lot of interesting similarities between like business owners in traditional industries or traditional entertainment versus like the gaming content space, and there's of course a lot of massive differences, right? So one of the biggest one is that for most industries, not all, it's pretty hard to just say like, all right, I'm going to start a business tomorrow and it's going to do this and I'm going to make money off of it
by myself
in my room. But that's not so easy to do. Right. Whereas content creation, like, you can get a relatively basic setup and just kind of get going right away.
Yeah.
But I think, the similarities are that, the personalities often wind up being kind of similar to some degree. People are willing to put themselves out there. They're willing to take some risk in the hope that they're able to spread what they love doing to a very wide audience.
Sure.
Of course, we're trying to do it for profit to some degree here, but the goals can be different. But it takes a certain kind of person to be willing to do this in the first place, and that's true across the board. And I think that the other, it's interesting that I didn't mention this a second ago when you asked about other speaking things that I've done. One of the things I did late last year, actually almost a year ago exactly, was I went to a conference and helped speak at basically a conference about the cross section between traditional entertainment, esports, and content creation, and how there's a lot of folks who are maybe in content who want to get more into doing music or more into like voice acting or more into other traditional entertaining. And of course, there's like athletes and musicians who are starting to get into gaming and trying to make their own channels, all that kind of stuff. And the key concept that we kind of kept coming back to was, number one, it has to feel authentic, that you, the person creating the stuff, is really into what you're doing for it to be pretty successful. People have tried to kind of like throw stuff out there, and some of it has been, not terribly successful for whatever reason, but that authenticity is pretty huge. Yeah. And then, does it make sense for, from an investment, from a long-term perspective, or even a medium to long-term perspective, when it's about, hey, are you just doing this to like sell a couple products, right? Like a candy bar or a hoodie or something like that. Or are you really doing this to, enable your fan base to get what they want, which is to wear, a version of you or something that represents, your core brand and passion on their
building a brand, right?
Yeah, build that brand, right? Engage the fan base. So there's certainly a lot of that. I could probably talk about this one question for an hour and a half. I'll try. Tell me
this, Ben. To shift it a little bit is, so those are really good points, by the way, on the differences and the similarities. How does it affect your specific per se strategy from a financial advisor standpoint, from somebody who comes to you, let's say maybe the construction business and that's a couple years old, growing or whatever, versus a content creator or a pro gamer getting into content creation or something like that? How does it affect your strategy? Is there a difference? Do you kind of come at it the same way? How does that look?
Yeah, I will say this: the biggest difference is really kind of this one question, the answer to it, which is, where do you see this going? What's the exit plan?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. With a business, a lot of the times it's, I want to build this up for 3 to 5 years and then sell it and get rid of this thing. Or sometimes it's the opposite. It's more like, hey, I want to build a business that I can pass on to my kid and my grandkids.
A legacy.
Have this be our family's legacy exactly for generations to come. Yeah. With content, that's probably, neither one of those is probably going to be the answer.
Yeah.
Right. Pretty unlikely that, Mr. Beast is going to pass down Mr. Beast stuff to his grandkids and have them become, junior Mr. Beast the third or whatever.
He's going to pass down something, though.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But, the point being that when I'm kind of creating like the financial plan for a pro gamer, a content creator, or whoever it is, it's really more about, hey, if you don't know yet, let's at least think about what would a career transition look like? What would potential retirement look like? If you want to be more work optional after this, how do we achieve that? And it's much more about piecing together different time frames of their lives. And so there's a similarity there to some people in like traditional entertainment or sports, where like professional athletes have a limited number of years where they can earn enormous amounts of money, and then at some point thereafter, something has to change.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a lot of 95-year-olds in the NFL these days.
Let me guess, Ben. The answers to those questions are I don't know, and I don't know.
Yeah.
That's usually the case. Yeah, pretty much. It's pretty hard to define. Rarely is someone like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this professional career for 5 years. Then I'm going to coach for 3 years. Then I'm going to start a, real estate empire, and then retire at age 40.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like that sounds
make
cool.
Your job easy. You could just
I was about to say, if they came to you with that was like, all right, let's do it. That goes back to goals.
There, actually, but yeah, not usually off the bat. Not like day one is like, here's the plan.
It's so funny how it all comes back to goals and what your overall, like what you're trying to do with life, and how quickly those can change. I mean, it's, We have clients, and a lot of our clients are younger. They don't have a family. They don't have, they're not married. They don't have kids or anything like that. And not everybody's going to pursue that. But for the ones who are, like, all that can just happen within a year, right? And like now all of a sudden you're finding a great example. Actually, I was going through Twitter the other day, and Nadeshot announced that he and his wife were having they were pregnant. And so like he literally just got married. Now they're pregnant. Like within a year, right? A year and a half. His life and possibly his financial plan has just drastically changed. Like,
Totally.
and he may not even know that yet, but just that's how quick it can happen. And
while he's, running a business, launching things like Juvie, there's a lot going on in that financial plan. You need a robust team in place to help through all those, hopefully all ups, but ups and downs, twists and turns, whatever it is.
Yeah. His specific financial plan is probably actually very crazy, because you're right. He does have, Juvie, but then 100 Thieves, everything going on there. So that's a whole team. That's more than the three of us could probably handle too.
Yeah, right. No, and it's a good point. And I want to maybe transition us a little bit and on that, because it's a good transition point into kind of the last part we're going to do, which is kind of looking at specific scenarios. Now, obviously these are just made up scenarios, but basically, Ben, if you're okay with it, what I'd like to do is kind of just talk a little bit about kind of what your strategy would be. And I know what you said, and this is going to hinge on a lot of it of what the goals are, but I know that you do work with a lot of people. And so you've seen a lot of different scenarios on how you maybe some suggestions of how you would start with kind of 3 different scenarios, and we'll lay them out. And probably when we get this edited down, maybe we'll throw them up on the screen so you guys can kind of follow along.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you kind of a general scenario. You can tell me how unrealistic it is. If it is unrealistic, we can maybe move it a little bit. And then I basically want you to give me kind of some starting points of how you maybe direct them, things to think about, things like that. And then we'll kind of just get through as many as we can. I know we only have about 15 minutes or so left. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
All right. So scenario 1, we have a content creator. We're going to just say 25 years old, single. Doesn't really matter, but single might matter. We'll say they have annual net income $500,000 from their content creation business. They have $600,000 in the bank, and that's it. They just have $600,000 in savings in cash, and that's it. Don't have any stock bonds, no investments, and they come to you and say, Ben, where do I need?
What
to
do
start?
I do?
Yeah. Well, that actually happened to me like not even a month ago with a pretty similar scenario.
And Ben, I want you to just say this. So before you start, I showed Garrett this scenario yesterday, and he said, "This is really $600K in cash, 25." And I said, "Hey, I'm just saying."
No, I laughed. So the scenario: $500K in annual net income and $600K in cash in the bank, and I laughed because it was like the numbers were so like. It's so clean, and it's like 25 years old.
Obviously never happens like that.
Yeah, but that was just a funny scenario when I first read it off the page. But yeah, give us your big hitters. Like if you could say like, okay,
Let's start here.
Yeah, like 3 things like right away that jump off the page at you that you could probably do that they could act pretty quickly on.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things. First, let's start with the income being at $500K a year. First of all, that is a phenomenal achievement. So like, great job.
Yeah.
I think right off the bat here, it's about figuring out, all right, how much do you really need to like live off of in terms of expenses? It's really easy for people to start making all this money when they're young and be like, oh, well, I'm going to go buy everything I want and go absolutely bonkers with it.
Yep.
So like creating some like at least structure around, hey, if you want all this success and all this money to like sustain you financially for the very long term, for the rest of your life, let's start thinking about how to budget for putting some of that to work versus just spending it all on the next shiny thing, every 2 seconds.
So you said a word there. You said the word budget. Is that what we're going to go step 1 here, is to come up with some sort of budget?
Well, I hesitate to say yes, but the short answer kind of is yes. The reason I hesitate to say it is because I find that like the people in this community usually maybe don't have a lot of like very structured expenses in their life. Like maybe they pay rent.
Sure.
Maybe they don't. Maybe they live at home or they live with their team. I mean, if a content creator is probably going to be paying rent to somebody, pro gamers might not have any living expense for like housing, might be covered by the team or the organization. But beyond that, like just spending a lot of time doing the stream, like they might not have, massive expenses outside of things. So it might feel very easy to save up all this cash, $600K of cash, and be like, well, I should just go spend this. So I'm going to introduce this concept that I've mentioned a bunch in the past, which is called reverse budgeting, where it's not like, hey, you should put around 3,000 aside for housing and living, 2,000 or $1,000 a month for food, and then invest or save the rest. It's more like, no, here's your savings target. Let's try to save out of this 500K. Let's say take home, you're probably getting, maybe closer to like $300,000 after taxes. Of course, we didn't specify that, but let's just say it's $300,000 after taxes. Let's say, all right, in order to really make this last, you got to try to save half of that. You got to try to save at least $150 a year, and then we can figure out where that goes, and then maybe you can spend the rest. Maybe that's actually being too generous. Maybe it's more like, realistically, maybe you only spend closer to 8, 9, maybe 10K a month. So let's try to push it. Let's try to save 200K a year, and then you can spend the rest. Anything after that.
Oh, I love that.
That's an easier way to think about budgeting, where it's more about, can I hit this target of savings and investments, as opposed to, all right, I've spent what I want to spend.
The rest
what else
is
is there to save?
Yeah.
So budgeting is such. The reason I said that out loud was budgeting is such an ugly word oftentimes, and people don't want to.
Scary.
People don't want to do that. They're like, budget, too much work. That's going to limit me, right? But it sounds like the way you said it with that reverse budget. I mean, I love that, because now you're not limiting. It's actually like, no,
freeing.
You can spend all of this after we hit these goals, right? After we put this money where we said we were going to put it, whatever's left, if it's 200K, do what you want with it. Go spend it on whatever, right? And I love that, right? We're going to hit our goals, but we're not going to restrict people on what they, like you said, 2,000 on housing and 3,000 on groceries and this and that. It's like, no, we're just going to hit our goals, and then after that, take the rest and do what you got to do to, make it through the year.
That's what I do personally, and I find fun. Like I have like I have a savings goal for every month or every quarter, because every month is going to be different, right? Sometimes you're going to go on a vacation, sometimes you're not. Sometimes it's going to be the holiday season, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
But if I can hit like, I've saved like $10,000 by X date. Like, awesome. I freaking did it. Like, that's like, that makes me feel good and makes me feel happy. So that's what I do personally.
We know the numbers for you are obviously a lot higher than 500,000 a year and 600K. We know Big Money Ben has way more than that. So what else would you do?
Sure.
What else jumps out at you? We talked about reverse budgeting. We'll call it that. What's next?
So next I'll just put it very bluntly. $600,000 of cash is too much cash.
Yep.
For pretty much everyone who would ever be in this scenario. You want to think about it more like, all right, how much cash is the right amount of cash for things like an emergency fund? And for people in this space in particular, how much do you need to keep in cash, maybe in a business account, right? Not your personal account, but a business account, specifically for, your quarterly estimated tax payments. That's where you guys come in.
Yay.
Or, paying contractors, paying a video editor, paying somebody else, like whatever your other expenses are. So there's sort of like, how much do you absolutely have to have in cash? Let's make sure we have kind of the safety first taken care of.
I'll help you out. I feel safe with 50,000 in cash in the bank. What do I do with the rest of it?
Yeah, so 50 might be a great way to think about it, right? If that's equivalent to like, 6 to 12 months of expenses for you.
Sure.
Great. And then the rest, how do we put it to work, right? You can think of it as sending your dollars off to summer camp to go make friends and come back with more friends who are also made of money.
Yes, sir.
That's
Financial Advisor Ben 101 right there.
Yeah,
I love that.
clip that.
Beginning of compound interest, sending money off to money camp.
We could talk nerd stuff all day. We could go hours on this.
Yeah, we love it. All right. So we're
But I think
is that
the
investing?
key there is like, it's like what kind of accounts should you use? What kind of investments? I mean, the investments should be tied to ideally multiple goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's some in retirement accounts. Big fan of retirement accounts because most people in the country maybe only have access to like basic IRAs, which let you put in $6,500 per year, and you can do Roth or traditional. I won't get into the details too much of that right this second, but $6,500 into a retirement account that's going to have you, have some kind of tax advantaged savings for your long-term retirement is a good place to start. But because everyone in the content creator industry is generally their own business, they're self-employed, there are way more higher, end retirement accounts you can choose from, right? Things like a SEP IRA or a solo 401k can take that max contribution from $6,500 to $66,000 a year. There's some rules around that, but if you put that much more into a retirement account and you're able to do it in a tax deductible fashion, you might be saving 37 to 50%, depending on what state you live in your marginal tax bracket.
When
Just
otherwise
in
that
taxes in that
when
1 year from doing that one contribution, right? It could be a massive tax savings just from putting money in there.
when otherwise that money would have just been sitting in your savings account doing nothing.
Yeah, and then it can be invested, for the very long term, so you can
Right.
have a more kind of like growth-focused investment strategy in there, which might be very, the global stock markets. Have a diversified plan for
Mhm.
all of these different accounts that you're investing in, but
And that would be
retirement
something that
accounts
you
can
were
be
you were
very
looking at
long-term focused.
you were looking at
Yep,
with the client to say like what kind of what did they want to do with it, but you would have multiple options there. And
yeah,
with I would assume with there's that number of 600K, you'd have multiple options to be able to split that up.
exactly right, exactly right. And maybe
So,
you have again some for retirement, some for like just buying a house next couple of years, and then some for just general wealth accumulation, right? Maybe that's a bit more of a generic target of let's just put this money to work so that we can use it when we need it.
sure. So because I want to be respectful of your time, and I know we had two other scenarios. I don't want to probably get into them fully, but let's just say numbers are a little bit down from what you just considered, and maybe more something like 100 to 150K in cash, and we're looking at somebody who maybe has more of a W-2, somebody like that maybe is a esports professional, so not as much cash, and maybe even a situation that you already talked about of something that isn't going to last forever, right? They're going to only maybe be competing for a few more years. What would a scenario like that look like versus maybe this other scenario that's producing a lot of cash flow? Would you be able to help that person? What would you recommend if they're mainly just competing and they get a pretty healthy W-2 and they just have 100 to 200K in cash sitting there and don't know what to do with it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for someone like that, where they're maybe like a W-2 employee of a broader organization, right? Which is a lot of the pro gamers, especially in the CDL or maybe in the OWL, but not every professional gamer, every professional competitive esport has W-2 employees. A lot
Mhm.
of them do treat their players as independent contractors. But if you're in that situation, um, it's a similar concept of like, all right, how much should you have in cash? Let's put the rest to work. Even if they have some, there's still ways to make sure that you're at least making the right progress for the long term. Even if we're not starting here at like a 6 out of 10, but we're starting here at a 1 or a 2 out of 10. Getting on the right path as early as possible
Right.
makes a humongous difference. I've done some educational sessions with pro teams like this, with people like this in there in the room, and I show them these charts of, hey, if you do what you're doing here of just ignoring everything, you're basically on path to run out of money before you're 35 or 40 years old, right? Simple as that, right? You're used to like income here and you're used to having a lot of your expenses covered for you. But when you're on your own and you're not, earning as much, that goes away really fast. So if we
Yep.
can get you on a path where you do this correctly and this correctly and this correctly, and it's like, put some money to, work in investments, use some kind of tax advantaged account. Maybe it's a retirement account like a 401k through your company, or maybe it's like a health savings account, depending if you have that as
Yep.
an option from your company provided health insurance. That'd be nice. But if you just start to use some of those things, those charts go from making money before age 30 to running out of money at age 40 to making money before age 30 and watching it continue to grow and compound until you're 99 years old.
Yep.
So
I like that one
someone like
better.
this, I would start with those basics.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's exactly what I wanted you to hit on, and I figured that's where you would go with it. But I think that's so crucial. And again, just disclosure for everybody. Obviously, nothing Ben's saying is going to work for everyone. This isn't advice for you to go out and do this, but I hope that it kind of gives some perspective to people of maybe they're gamer and they got onto an esports team and they're having a few great years. They've had a few great years. Things don't last forever, and to Ben's point, you're going to have goals are going to change. 10 years from now may look completely different. And to your point, Ben, just by changing a few things of where that money's going when you get it, between taxes and investments and some of these things that you've hinted on, you can change the landscape of your future dramatically. And I think that's what you do. Clearly, you're extremely knowledgeable on it. And yeah, I think that's super valuable for people to know.
I was over here taking notes on some of it because I think I love the phrasing that you use, the reverse budget and then send your dollars to summer camp. I thought that was great. I know that we have a third scenario, but we are 5 minutes away from 1:30. You want to do some quick hitters with Ben? I want to ask him a couple of questions super quick, but really not related to finance. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's cool. And then
All right, Ben, you ready? Are you
I'm
better? Are you better at Dota 2 or are you better at Call of Duty?
Ooh. I will say this: I'm not that good at either one, but I compare myself to the pros who are obviously ridiculously good. I will say this: at one point, my MMR was high enough where I was in the top 5% of Dota players in the world.
Okay,
That
there
was a
we go.
long time ago, and I have not played as much in the last several years, so I'm not quite at that level anymore.
You probably just need to upgrade
Um,
your PC. That's all.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's like riding a bike, Ben.
oh, I should stop playing on a gaming laptop and get a real PC. I'm working on that, guys.
Okay, all right. Are you excited? Because COD Next is going on. I'm looking.
Right now, actually.
I'm on Twitch right now. The Call of Duty page has 122,000 people watching. So shout out to everybody at COD Next. That's awesome. Super dope event. The new COD looks good from the leaks that I was not supposed to see, but that I saw on Twitter. Have you seen any of those leaks? And what do you think of the new Call of Duty? Are you excited?
I am excited for the new Call of Duty.
Great.
Period. I think it's going to be not only like a really fun game with some like great maps that we already know are coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's also probably going to be a much more interesting game to watch the pros play with more advanced movement, with more interesting strategic potential, with red dots back, with some of these things are things that the community's been asking for a while, and to have them all back, hopefully I will put this plug in, hopefully with ranked play from the beginning of launch.
Yeah,
that'd be real nice.
Hey, we're gonna be grinding
Careful.
some ranked play. Yep.
Careful, you're gonna get hopes up now. Calm down.
A guy can wish, right? A guy can dream.
That's right. So yeah, we're excited as well. So I asked about Dota, asked about COD. Really quick, because I want to hit on this before we cut off. What would be the best way for somebody if they wanted to reach out? They listened to this podcast or saw it on YouTube, wherever they're at. Where could they find you, and what would be the best way of going about reaching out to you?
Yeah, would love to talk to anybody who I can help, period. So if folks want to find me on, email is probably an easy way because, I live in my email like a lot of professionals, which you can either use right here. It's blake@miraclemileadvisors.com. Check out our website, which is miraclemileadvisors.com. You can see a little bit more about me and connect me that way. Or you can, use socials. I'm on Twitter @Benjamin D. Lake. We're on Discord literally right now. So if you know Garrett and Joseph, just ask them to connect us. That might even be the easiest way. It's just
definitely
have the intro made for you.
There we go.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I think that's great, and we'll definitely drop your email and stuff to where people can find it. I think there's a lot of people that could benefit from a conversation, even if, as you said at the beginning, maybe right now is not the perfect time, just to have that conversation to get them thinking about it. I'll say this too before we hop. Ben, you are going to be at TwitchCon. We will be as well. If you guys are going to be at TwitchCon, you're watching this, hit us up, Discord us. Hopefully we'll see you there. I know Ben is going to be probably introducing us to some people and vice versa. We're excited to see you there, Ben. And yeah, man, we just really appreciate you coming on. I feel like we could talk about this for hours. I'm sure we'll have you back on at some point for another episode to maybe dig deep into certain topics. But I think you provide a lot of value for people who just maybe don't know much about it. And we really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
This was a pleasure. Thank you guys for having me on. Hopefully people could, pick and choose some little tidbits they can use in their own lives from this. I'm sure there'll be a next time. Maybe we'll talk about some of the more advanced strategies for content creators. Maybe we'll talk about, I don't know, mistakes we've seen people make. That's always an interesting one.
Definitely.
Maybe like you tell everybody, maybe just don't follow terrible advice that you see on other platforms like TikTok.
like
just
TikTok,
maybe that's just a great way to take. But yeah, it was great. Thank you guys for having me on. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, we're coming up on the end of the year. So everybody, if you're trying to get something done before the end of the year, you need to talk with either Ben or us. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Like Ben said, we're on Discord. Anybody else watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. Comment if you have any questions or concerns.
Check out the links below. Dropped a new newsletter this week. So subscribe to the newsletter if you're trying to stay updated on everything going on with us. Check out Ben, and we appreciate you guys.
Yep.
See you next time.
Peace.
Thanks, everybody.